Screen versus stage. We are all stage actors. Oh yes, we are. You may not actually have walked the boards to perform, at least not since school, but every time we want to get our way by putting on an act, we are acting, and because it is for someone at a reasonable distance away from us, a real distance, it is stage acting. The child wanting her own way who cries real tears, which are miraculously cleared when she gets it, is giving a particularly convincing performance. The stern authoritarian voice you put on when complaining about bad service in a shop is another. The fawning words and actions we all go through when pulled over for speeding, and the subsequent fake smiles, comprise yet another performance aimed at a particular audience. These are moments when we are using our words and bodies to convince someone of some emotion or thought that may not, in fact, be the literal truth of what we are feeling, but is the emotion we want the other person to believe we are experiencing. This is what stage actors do, too. Very few of us, especially, funnily enough, screen directors, have experience in acting for the screen, or know what the difference would be between this and the acting mentioned above. When I ask people of no experience, limited experience, or who are very experienced indeed what the difference is between screen performing and stage performing, I get surprisingly uniform answers. From professional actors and students both in the United States and the United Kingdom, here is a selection of the answers I have heard to the following question: what difference would you make, if any, between acting on screen compared with acting on stage? Do less. Make it more real. Make it more intimate. Tone it all down. Make it more internal. Scale down your performance. Be more still. Make fewer facial expressions. Be smaller. Be more natural. These are the most common reactions, and they are all wrong. Usually in a list of 10 items I am given by a class or group, 7 or 8 will be variations from this wrong list. One method drama school in England even graduated its students recently with the declaration that they were probably better prepared for television than the theatre, since they had been trained to be minutely realistic, this from a course where over the 3 years they never once appeared on a screen, or ever analysed what screen acting might be. In the old days young stage actors learned from older, experienced professionals, by watching and by acting with them. The young apprentices would play small roles, and stand in the wings watching the master actors at work, hoping one day to be able to copy them, and in their turn, to be copied. How many professional stage productions have you seen in your lifetime? That is, productions where you paid to watch and the actors were paid to perform. 20. 50. 100. Let's be generous and make it 300. That was generous, wasn't it? So how many hours of professional stage acting have you watched? 900. Again, let's be generous and make it an even 1,000, and for most of you, you know that you have not experienced that many hours of professional stage acting. And how many hours of professional screen acting have you seen? How many? Current estimates indicate that by the time you have left your teen years, you have watched between 10,000 and 20,000 hours of screen stuff. And yet, most people have no idea what screen performing involves, and always relate their idea of it to stage versions of acting. Strange, isn't it? On screen, you can be seen in anything from a full-length shot of your whole body to a close-up of your face, depending on the size of the shot. I must be able to talk to you about these different sizes, but unfortunately there is no worldwide acceptance of what a size of shot means, and there are even variations within countries. My definitions are, I believe, the most widely used, but there is considerable confusion as to what medium close-up means, for example, and it is always necessary to describe your shots to establish a common vocabulary. What follows are the descriptions that I shall be using. Onto the TV screen comes a picture of a woman. Her head is at the top of the screen, her toes at the bottom. This is called a long shot, LS. Most people watch a television screen that is about 20 to 22 inches wide, and about 8 to 10 feet away from them, although widescreen television sets are becoming more common. Try now, if you can, watching a blank screen 10 feet away and picturing this image on it, the full-length shot of a woman. Now, how far away would you have to be in a theater to see an actor this size? Yes, it is about 65 feet, or the back row of a large theater. And how do actors convey thought, action, and mood to an audience this far away? Yes, through whole body motions and attitudes as well as loud voices, for it is very difficult to see detailed expressions on their faces. Next shot, the medium shot, MS. Here the woman's head is still at the top of the screen, but now the image is larger, and we can only see down to her waist. This is the usual size of shot, when there are 2 or 3 people on the screen together. How my classes think screen acting differs from stage acting. Do less. Make it more real. Make it more intimate. Tone it all down. Make it more internal. Scale down your performance. Be more still. Make fewer facial expressions. Be smaller. Be more natural. And in what sort of theater would you expect to see people this size? Yes, at the back of a small theater. Actors here can use some of their facial expressions, but they still have to use their bodies. Next, the medium close-up, MCU. This is where you see the actor's head and shoulders, with the bottom of the frame cutting across the actors at chest level. Where would you be in the theater now? The odds are you have chosen a very small theater, the front row of a fringe, pub, or off-Broadway theater, for this size shot is the equivalent to a distance of about 10 feet, yes, the medium close-up is the size a person would be if they were standing where your television set is. In other words, there is a relationship with real life for this size, and it is no coincidence that this is the most popular size of shot in television drama. I have concentrated on television for this section. The size of shots in films as shown in movie houses, are a little different, with the images tending to be shot a bit looser than television. In the classic John Ford film Stagecoach, there is barely a shot closer than a medium shot. Mind you, since most films now gain essential revenue by being shown on television in their second run, or being released very soon on video and DVD, the sizes of images in the movies are getting larger, and correspond more to the televisual style of shooting. And how does an actor communicate when the audience is only 10 feet away? Well, with subtlety, expressions, small facial tics and so on, just as they would in a real situation. The story does not end here, for there is another size of shot to talk about, the big close-up, BCU. Here, the face entirely fills the screen, from the eyebrows to the chin. And where would you be in a theater to get this view of an actor? You would probably need to climb into bed with an actor to get your face close enough to see her this size, and by the time you were that close, your eyes would be out of focus anyway. So you never see a real person in the same way as this gigantic close-up. But it doesn't stop us from using it. It is, if you like, an unreal size of shot, and might correspond to seeing what someone is thinking rather than presenting. Actors on tour with a production that is going to play in different theaters learn to adapt their performances according to whether they are playing in a large, medium, or intimate theater. They alter their performances from venue to venue, from week to week. Since screen acting involves many different shot sizes, I would state that the screen actor must be prepared to adapt her performance from shot to shot. In other words, you must change your performance according to the size of shot. Long shot, LS large, melodramatic style of acting medium shot, MS intimate theater style medium close-up, MCU reality big close-up, BCU. Think it's simple now, don't you think? Watching the stage versus watching the screen. You see, when members of an audience are watching a stage play, they have choices about where to look. They can look at the speaker, or the listener, or the servant in the corner. They can study the scenery, the lighting, or even the head of the person sitting in front of them if the play is too boring. As far as the screen is concerned, there is nothing else to look at except the moment presented by the production team. So it has to have greater significance, since the audience has to get everything from this one picture, rather than having a whole range of images to choose from. Adjust scale of performance to size of shot long shot, LS large, melodramatic style of acting medium shot, MS intimate theater style medium close-up, MCU, reality big close-up, BCU. Think it there is another fundamental difference between stage and screen, especially the television screen. In the theater we see the actor by reflected light, while on the screen the image is itself transmitting light. This makes a television image very compelling. And fatal for those trendy stage directors who like to imitate life by putting a television set on stage and then have it showing something. Recently, I watched a production in London that did this, and the audience happily watched the previous night's news and commercials on the television screen, while the poor stage actors tried unsuccessfully to compete. We are now so used to watching the screen, that when a lecturer I know used a TV screen to show herself to the back of a remote hall, she found that the audience near her preferred to watch her on the screen rather than in the flesh. What was more upsetting was that they still watched the screen when the image went awry, and only snow was showing. Imagine two people talking to each other in real life. What changes would they make if the moment were to be presented on a stage? Maybe they would talk a little louder, maybe they would turn their shoulders out a little to present more of their faces to the audience, but on the whole, there would be a very close similarity between the real-life version and the stage version. And if this moment were to be shown on the screen, here the changes could be dramatic, with one actor standing very close to the other, or standing behind her talking into her hair. If both actors are to be in the same shot, there has to be a radical departure from what they would do in real life in order to put them on screen, giving the impression of real life. This is called cheating. The structure of dramas on screen, especially television, is often very different from that of stage dramas, especially when dealing with soap operas, or shows with regular characters. Apart from the results of typecasting, there is also the fact that the normal dramatic form of change and growth cannot be used, for a character has to be more or less the same from episode to episode, from year to year. That is, of course, why people watch serial dramas, to lend some stability to a challenging world. Viewers like to know that Agent 007 will, whatever the trauma, survive at the end, or that a particular character will always win the court case, and that another character will always lose. This leads to my theory of suffering. Regular television dramas must present characters suffering so that the audience can feel that at least someone they know is having a worse time than themselves. In real life we do not know how events will turn out, whether we will cope well with the unknowns of life, but we can tune in and find that our favorite villain is still the same sly dog we remembered all those episodes ago. The detective will always solve the murder case, and our every woman heroine will always live and fight on to face another emotional crisis on our behalf. At a conference on soap dramas in Germany some years ago, I presented the idea that American soap operas tend to show rich people suffering while British ones tend to show poor people suffering. I then watched the latest German offering in this form, and came to the conclusion that it had middle-class people going through the various traumas on behalf of their audience. So for the actor, learn how to present the maximum suffering and anguish, and just wait for the jobs to roll in. I think you can detect some tongue-in-cheek around here, although John Barrymore, when asked why he chose to portray a smaller part to a larger one in a movie, declared he always went for the character who did the most suffering. A lot of actors talk a lot of sense about the differences between the two media, but when asked about acting they will often tell the questioner what they think people want to hear, rather than what they know. Because actors chosen to act in the movies come from a pool of thousands, those chosen tend to be those who tend to act naturally for the screen, whether they know it or not. Some of the reasons they give, then, for their expertise are not always the actual ones. I was working with a wonderful elderly actor in New York, who claimed that there was no difference at all between her work on stage and on screen. She had trained in Stanislavski techniques, and they worked just as well for screen as stage, she declared. As we continued to work, she would acknowledge that the things I was talking about were, in fact, also what she did. By the end of the workshop, I had a long list of things that she now admitted she did differently on screen than on stage. This is not to criticize her, in fact. I come across this very often, but it shows that what she said she did with her acting was not what she actually did, and she was very skillful and deservedly successful. Many actors will talk about what they think they are expected to say, rather than the reality of working professionally on the screen. The leading questions asked of them: you always think the thoughts of the character you are playing, don't you? Force them into these positions. Some experienced actors will make statements along the lines of, "It has taken me all these years to learn to do nothing on screen. I just think it." Young actors, reading this, joyfully rush in to do the same and find to their horror that their performances don't exist, they are invisible. This is because the experienced actor now puts her thoughts onto her face without realizing it, and thinks she is doing nothing. There are two other interesting aspects of this phenomenon. First, as an actor gets more experienced in screen work, she automatically does those things I am talking about without realizing it. It's just like when you start to drive a car. It seems impossible to talk and shift gears at the same time, but somewhere later you can chat along with the best of us. The other reason is even more revealing. A star brings onto the screen not only her face and personality, but also our memory of her past successful performances. Screen. Audience told where to look. Very different from real life. Steady state for character. Change acting style from shot to shot. Stage. Audience chooses where to look. Close to real life. Character changes and grows. Change acting style from theater to theater. King Vidya writes of acting on screen. I want everything to look real, but not necessarily be real. Elia Kazan, the great method director, writes that the art of motion pictures is one of photographing looks, not photographing dialogue. All attempts to videotape live theater performances, and so get cheap television, have failed, offering further proof of the great difference between acting for the stage and for the screen. Unless the company is prepared to invest millions in a production, as with Trevor Nunn's stage production of Nicholas Nickleby, in which they did a film version of the stage presentation that took 6 weeks to rehearse and put in the can, attempts to bring video cameras into a theater and get something worthwhile cannot work. The style and approach of the actors are hopelessly compromised. Should they project for the live audience or for the camera? Should they position themselves for the live audience out front, or for the cameras that will inevitably be there on either side of them, trying to get onto their eye lines? The end result is usually poor television and poor theater. For archival purposes, it can be useful to stick a camera at the back of an auditorium and film the result, but it is still only a record of what happened that day and not a true account of the theatrical experience. The Nicholas Nickleby production worked on screen because all the performers were giving film performances, while giving the appearance of doing stage ones. That is also why it took so long to film. The British actor Ian Richardson was in New York and saw that they were going to show a video recording of the famous production of Sade that he had starred in some 10 years before. He sat at the back of the auditorium to see it. He was not so much shocked that the audience thought it bad and laughable, but that he found it that way too. Theatre exists in the eyes of its audience, and to take it out of its context, like Laurence Olivier's Othello, please don't see it on tape. You will see a dreadful screen performance that nowhere suggests the genius and brilliance of that performance in the theatre, is to take away something irreplaceable. That production Ian Richardson appeared in was brilliant. At the time it was seen in the theatre by the audience, who correctly gave it a standing ovation each night. So don't laugh at old films of the famous 19th century actress Sarah Bernhardt. They do not show the real theatricality. The two media are not compatible and need very different approaches to make each shine at its best. I went back to my old college some while ago to give a 2-day seminar on screen acting. On the second day, some of the participants, students training to be professional actors, did not turn up. The reason given was that they had decided they were only going to do theatre in their careers. Well, how nice to be so sure about such an uncertain profession, and such an uncertain future. I have left until last what most people put first. On stage the actor starts at the beginning and goes to the end, building and changing in one long, continuous event, while for the screen the actor is often asked to act scenes wildly out of context and out of time order. I put it last because, frankly, although it is a major difference, I don't find it changes what the actor has to do all that much. I know perfectly well that it might mean that the screen actor has to perform her last scene before getting to the first one, but actors do that sort of jumping around in stage rehearsals, and although it is a correct observation that this is what happens for the screen, I do not see it has any great effect on what actors do. After all, they are required to act a scene, so they act it, with as much background and detail as they can. What the actor does then is substantially the same as what she does for any other sort of acting as far as preparation and performing is concerned.